Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for joining me. My name is Josefa Hamid, and welcome to today's webinar. We're going to do a weekly analysis. So, just a couple of housekeeping items before we continue. So, everyone is muted, but we really want you to ask questions if you have any during the session. So, it's a Zoom meeting. If you've used Zoom before, it's a standard Zoom webinar or meeting where you can just pop questions in the chat box or in the Q&A box. Either one is fine. I've got them both open in front of me. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask away. It's 10 a.m., just gone 10 a.m. GMT. I'm based in Toronto, so it's a nice early morning start for me, 5 a.m. Eastern time. Okay, so just a little bit about, well, first of all, before we get into the content, as always with these things, is a risk disclaimer. It's a standard risk disclaimer. It's essentially saying that everything you hear today is not for, it's not advice. It's not trading advice. It's purely for educational purposes only, and trading carries risk. A little bit about myself. As I mentioned earlier, my name is Josefa Hamid. I'm a senior analyst for dailyforex.com. I'm a forex trader predominantly. I trade all of the majors, so 7 or 8 of the major pairs, and a handful of crosses. I look at about 25 or 27 charts, but really my focus is on those 7 or 8 major pairs, and maybe about 2 or 3 crosses: euro yen, euro pound, pound Aussie dollar, and a couple of others. So really, just those are what I mainly trade. And I trade a couple of futures contracts as well. So I trade the S&P 500 or the ES. Occasionally crude oil. I've made some natural gas trades as well. But I'd say the bulk of my trading is in forex. I think the most important thing I can really tell you about myself is that I use technical analysis for my decision-making process. So if you look at my charts, you're going to see my charts in a little bit. I use mainly the price charts, support and resistance levels, and a couple of key fib levels. It's very price action oriented. There isn't, I don't use any indicators. There's no moving average on my chart. There's no RSI or stochastics or anything like that. It's very much price based. And I'm based in Toronto, Canada. So if you're in the neighborhood, if you're in the Greater Toronto area, we're on lockdown at the moment, so there isn't much to do. But if you happen to be where I am, give me a shout. Be happy to have a cup of coffee with you. Actually, it's a good question to ask. I'm always curious about attendees at these kinds of webinars. Daily Forex is a global company. So if you just want to let me know, where are you from? Just type it into the chat window, what city or country you're in. Be interesting to find out where my audience is. I'll have a quick sip of water. Dean from Australia. Nice to meet you, Dean. Del from Egypt. I've never been to Australia. I've got family there. I've got a couple of cousins there. I've been to Cairo, and Gonda's nice to meet you from South Africa. Another place I want to visit. All right, guys. Thank you very much. And I've got my team on the line as well they're in the Middle East too. Okay, so the first thing I do when we're doing a weekly analysis, and this is really following my own routine, is I start off with looking at the economic calendar. So I want to get a handle on what's going to drive price action or charts in the next week or two ahead. Now, I am a technical trader, so I don't look at the economic calendar in terms of trying to make price decisions. I'm not looking to make predictive decisions in terms of from economic announcements. I'm not looking at, say, for example, the CPI or an interest rate announcement and trying to decide, okay, if the interest rate announcement is this, my trade is going to be that, and so on. It's really to get an idea of, okay, these are some key economic announcements, and these will probably propel the chart. And the other thing I do is I don't want to get into a trade prior, just immediately, like in the half an hour before a key announcement. Often the price can gap or just the spreads can be high, etc. Um, so we're going to look at the economic calendar first, and then we're going to flip to some charts. This week, it's a relatively quiet week, especially given the last few weeks that we've had. Obviously, it's December the 8th now, about a month ago. It feels like a lifetime ago. The US election took place. And that's the last time I did a weekly webinar for Daily Forex, just prior to the US election. It was a very uncertain time. Nobody quite knew how it was going to unfold. Nobody quite knew how long it would take to for the result to be properly announced and confirmed. And although it looks like 99% certainty that Joe Biden will be the next president of the United States, there is still this air of uncertainty of how that transition process is gonna occur. So right now, the economic calendar feels relatively quiet, but tomorrow, Wednesday, 3 p.m. These are all GMT times. There's a Canadian CAD, Bank of Canada statement, and an overnight rate announcement. So this is a key interest rate announcement, or key interest rate figures that are coming out. That's going to affect the USD CAD primarily, and any CAD related pair. The following day, Thursday, 12:45 p.m. The euro, I've got a spelling mistake there. There's a main a refinancing rate and a monetary policy statement. And the same day, about 45 minutes later, the European Central Bank will be holding a press conference, probably discussing what they've just announced in the prior 45 minutes. That day, at the same time, coincidentally, the CPI, Consumer Price Index, and unemployment claims are being released by the US, and it's going to affect every major pair. And come Friday afternoon, 1:30 p.m., the USD United States Core PPI, that's a Producers Price Index, similar to the CPI. CPI's Consumer Price Index, PPI's Producers Price Index, and that is also a big gauge for inflation and a big gauge for where interest rates might go. So this is the economic calendar. So we're really looking, because there's two big USD announcements later in the week, it's going to affect every major pair, and during the week, the couple of euro announcements. But tomorrow, the USD CAD, depending on the type of or depending on the strength of that announcement, that could have a big effect on the USD CAD. Okay. So looking at charts, just to give you an idea about what I'm going to look at, for weekly analysis, I conduct most of my trading on the 4-hour chart. I might zoom out to the daily. Very occasionally, I'll check the weekly chart to check for any key kind of support and resistance levels. But really, it's a 4-hour chart, and I might zoom into the 1 hour or the 15-minute. But this is the kind of time frames we're going to be focusing on. Okay, so let's quickly go to some charts. And you should see my window there. See my window. I'm going to start off with the Euro USD. Okay. So this is the 4-hour chart in the Euro USD. It's actually the first thing we should look at before we look at the Euro USD is look at the dollar index. I really want to start off with the dollar index because it's broken a few key levels. Now, the dollar index, for those of you that don't know, is an index that measures the strength of the US dollar against a bunch of pairs. Now, I don't trade the dollar index. It is tradable. There's some Forex brokers and CFD brokers where you can actually trade the dollar index. I don't trade it in itself, but it gives me direction for the overall US dollar. So if I think if the dollar index is looking bearish, which it is at the moment, I'm looking for bearish US dollar trades. So this is a long term. I'm going to start off with a long term chart because it's actually quite a clean chart. This is the daily chart of the US dollar index. You can see this big support that was made here. Right now, I'm using for the dollar index, I'm using Trading View, and then we're going to switch to MT4, MetaTrader 4, which is I'm using FXTM mainly as my broker right now, and AvaTrade. So there's a big support that was made earlier in March, and you can see the volatility really kicked in when the financial impact of coronavirus became apparent. But it broke that support and it tested it really neatly as resistance back in September. So it kind of confirms that this support is now resistance, and really we're looking at a bearish trend. And the last support it made, it just moved through it quite cleanly. This is a daily. We'll move into the 4-hour candles now. It moved through it quite cleanly. So I'm looking at I'm looking at a bearish trend for the US dollar. The dollar index is going down. So my bias automatically is to be selling the US dollar against various pairs. So we'll start off with that. That's my main thesis going into the markets for the next week. And in fact, probably for the rest of December and maybe January, I'm going to be bearish US dollar. Okay, now looking at the Euro USD. So if I'm bearish if I'm bearish the dollar, that means I'm going to be bullish the Euro USD. I'm buying the Euro and I'm selling the US dollar. So this is the 4-hour chart. It might be cleaner actually in the daily chart. Zoom out to the daily chart. You can see it made a key resistance back on 1st of September. So that's what I had marked for quite some weeks. And recently, in the last few days, it broke through that resistance. That resistance has become pretty relevant at the moment. So going back into the 4-hour chart, it broke through that resistance. I'm bullish the Euro USD, which is kind of in line with my bearishness of the dollar in total. So we've seen what I call an impulse move. I'll put a rectangle. So, started off this trend. There's a nice kind of impulse move here. Let's give it a nice, better color. There you go. And now it's starting to correct. So you're starting to see this this correction around here. So typically, when you're looking at a trend, there's usually an impulse, and then there's going to be a short correction. So what we're seeing is the price has moved up nicely. It's gone busted through that prior resistance. Now it's correcting. I think this is probably a pretty good buy point. You can, if you wanted to, you could line it up with a key fib level. 50% is where I like it to come down to. It's not quite down there, but I don't think it's going to make it all the way down there. I think it's a pretty good, decent buy point. I think that the Euro USD is going to continue going up. So I'm bullish Euro USD. Let's looking at dollar yen. Dollar yen is a lot messier. So this is I'll go back on the 4-hour chart first. It's in a downtrend, but it's a very volatile or a choppy downtrend. So it's not in a fantastic place. If you can see the red line here, let's scroll down. If I zoom out, I've drawn a trend line marking the downtrend. It's kind of in a bit of a triangle at the moment, but it is moving down. Going back to the 4-hour chart, it's made a support level here. Now, I mark the support here rather than here or even here because this is really where the price started to move up from. I'm always looking to see where is the price reacted. So it's reacted here. So this is my support, and it went down. It's met this support line. So and there's a resistance here. So it's in a bit of it's in a range essentially. I think it could go all the way up to here, somewhere around this kind of trend line area. This is not a primary trade for me. So I'm looking at the dollar yen. I have a view on it, but it's slightly bullish in the short term, the next week or two. It's not enough for me to want to trade it. Okay, pound dollar. So pound dollar is interesting because although I'm bearish the US dollar, the pound dollar itself I'm bearish on. So this will be, and this is primarily because of I think the pound is going to be more affected by Brexit than by the direction of the US dollar. And I don't think the Brexit talks are going to be particularly fruitful. They're painfully unfolding, and there's lots of uncertainty, and that's never good for any currency. But looking purely from a technical point of view, it made a resistance, the 4-hour chart. It made a resistance right here back in 1st of September again, pushed down, It's come back up and it's bounced pretty hard against this resistance already. So if we just zoom into the later candles, it's made some pretty bearish moves. I'm bearish the pound dollar. It's not. It may be starting a new downtrend. Um, I think the euro dollar is personally a better trade right now. But if I had to take a view on the pound dollar, it will be bearish. Okay, dollar Swiss. This is very clean for me right now. This is the 4-hour chart. It's been in a downtrend for, you could go back on the daily chart, and it's been a downtrend for a very long time. Then it got into a range here for a few months. Again, this is now just on the, if you go back to the 4-hour chart, there was a support that's made around beginning of November, November 6th, kind of November 6th to 9th. It was kind of in the support area right here. Bounced pretty hard off that support. So it's obviously a key level. And then when it came down to it, surprisingly to me, because I thought that support would hold, it it moved down pretty swiftly through that support. So that support is now gone. There isn't support for a while on the dollar Swiss. This is dollar Swiss franc. So I'm bearish dollar Swiss, and this is kind of in line with where the dollar index is going as well. It tried to make. Let's go down to the hour, and you can see it pretty clearly. It's in a range, but it tried to make a. It tried to pop up around here. Let's find a color for this. There you go. That's it. It tried to make a move up, and again, it's swiftly sold off. So I'm bearish dollar Swiss. Okay, dollar CAD. This is interesting. There's an announcement tomorrow for the interest rates, but just looking at the chart right now, again, key support level was made around the same time for the dollar Swiss as well. So for the dollar CAD, it was made around that 9th of November. Moved hard past it, made a high. I think this is probably around the 50% level on a fib level. Yeah, just broke the 50% level. That's a key between the 50 and 61.8% level. That's a key level for me. I like to see the price come up to that, and before making the next wave down. But it's certainly done that, and it broke nicely through that support level. To sell this, I would have really wanted it to come back up and test this as resistance, but it moved down too hard and too fast. So it's just teetering there right now. I'm properly bearish dollar CAD. Again, it's in line with my dollar index thesis. I think it will move down. Obviously, there's an announcement tomorrow. I can't see it. I can't see it reversing direction. Okay, Aussie dollar. US Aussie dollar. Let's take a step back for a second, and look at the daily chart. The reason I'm looking at the daily chart at the moment is because it's just broken a key resistance, and I want you to see where that key resistance is coming from. So this is the key resistance up here, and I marked it with this yellow line here. It built a support over the last, from September to pretty much November, over a few months. So from, let's have a look, end of September to end of October. So over that month, it built the support area, kind of confirming that this uptrend is holding, and then it broke through that resistance. So that's a high for pretty much a high for the year. It's broken through. We go back down to these lower time frames. We check out the hourly or the 4-hour. And it's holding. It's a breakthrough resistance. It took a bit of a dip down. It sold off, and it within the same trading session. So this is 2 4-hour consecutive 4-hour bars. It found liquidity, and it bought back up. There's order flow that came in, and it bought back up, just holding nicely above that resistance that it broke. So I'm bullish Aussie dollar, again in line, which makes me bearish the US dollar. So that's the Aussie dollar. Now moving on to the New Zealand dollar. So the New Zealand dollar, as you can probably imagine, is going to be quite correlated to the Aussie dollar. So if you look at the New Zealand dollar 4-hour chart, it's in a nice, really nice uptrend. I've marked this mini support it's made. It's not a huge support. It's just made a couple of bars, a couple of 4-hour bars. You can see it ties in nicely with this small resistance on the way up. It's making this nice, not what I would call a non-volatile trend up. So nice and compact. It's really nice and neat. The channel is it's not wide. It's a nice, neat channel like that. Um, and you can see it's moved up. Again, it's a nice place to buy the New Zealand dollar. Let's have a quick look at the long term. This is the daily chart. You're seeing what you're seeing on the 4-hour in a similar way. Just it's starting to trend up, and it's been trending up for a while. I'm just hearing great things out of New Zealand. They've really got a handle on coronavirus. They were one of the first countries to act. There was a picture that was tweeted out, I think about a week ago, where they showed a sporting event with something like 30 or 50,000 people watching a game of rugby at a big packed stadium in New Zealand. Nowhere else in the world is that happening, and that was like a mental sign that New Zealand really got a handle on the challenges that certainly Canada and where I live, the UK where I'm from, are facing. So that's the New Zealand dollar, US dollar. So quickly running through those majors again, just to give you a summary. The Euro USD, I'm bullish on, broken a key resistance. We can zoom out of this chart. You can see that resistance from beginning of September. Dollar yen, honestly, it's just in the range. I've marked some key levels for your reference, but I wouldn't trade it. Pound dollar, I'm bearish. It's hit a big resistance. Brexit is happening right now, and the market would just not wanting to be anywhere, selling off quite sharply off that resistance tells me it's bearish. It's not the cleanest trade though, but it's a view. Dollar Swiss, bearish again. It's broken that a very kind of key support here, and when it tried to push back up, it sold off. It's a speed. You want to look at how quickly these things sell off. So it moved up and it sold off very quickly. There's a lot of order flow that came in to sell it off. So I'm bearish. Dollar Swiss, dollar CAD, bearish again, broke that key support level and pushed down through it. It's just making a nice wave down. Aussie dollar, bullish, broken that key resistance from late August even, and it's holding above that. And New Zealand dollar, we just covered, it's in a nice uptrend. What more is there to say when you're in a nice uptrend? This is really where you can make your money. Last thing I'm going to look at is we'll have a quick look at gold. Gold I found really interesting to analyze. Now, the dotted yellow line that you see is the all-time high it made back in 2011. And from there, gold lost about a third of its value. Then over the years, it started slowly climb back up. And relatively recently, back in July, it broke back above that all-time high. So I really wanted to see how it was going to hold. And for about a couple of months, it held. I thought it was going to continue rocketing up, but it broke back below the previous all-time high. Anytime it tried to perch above it, you can see these three peaks here. It sold off, and the last time it moved back above it, order flow came in very rapidly and really sold it off. And it's more recent. It's broken this key support level here. I've marked it from this point here because this is really where the price reacted pretty hard when it pushed back up, and it's broken that support level here. And I think it's now touching it as resistance. I think it's going to fall back down. So I'm bearish, overall bearish gold. My view has changed actually. So as recently as September-ish, I thought it was going to break out of this range here. I was waiting for it to break out either way from its range. Either move up or down. It broke down. I was expecting it to go up, but you trade you let the market tip its hand. You don't just jump in. You let the market tip its hand. At this point, it's still in a range, a bit like dollar yen. If it's still in a range, why trade it? It seems to be breaking down off that range, and now I'm bearish this particular asset. Or this, it's not a forex pair, but it's gold spot against the US dollar. So those are my views on the market currently. I'm going to switch back to my presentation because I've got some final thoughts. If the chart isn't clear to you, always stay away. There's plenty of opportunities. I've gone through the majors. You can see I'm clear on some of them. Some of them really I don't know. I have a partial view. I'll mark the levels. But for example, the dollar yen, I would not trade right now. So if the chart isn't clear, and this is a general rule for trading, just stay away from that particular chart. Always mind your risk. I think the best practice is to carry a stop loss for every single trade and make sure that your potential reward or target is going to be higher or more than the value of the stop loss. So you want a positive reward to risk ratio. You want that reward to risk ratio to be above 1, ideally 1.5, 2, 3 to 1, something like that. Depends on your strategy, but ideally you always want your risk to be your reward to be at least 1 or greater, 1 unit or greater than the value of your stop loss. And the other thing to do when you're minding your risk is don't put too much capital into a single trade. Decide a percentage of capital you're going to risk on a single trade. It could be 1%, it could be 3%, 2%, whatever it is, and stick to that. If you want to contact me, feel free just to email me, Huzefa@dailyforex.com. One of the big reasons I do this is trading I'm a full-time trader. Trading is a super lonely business. I do it primarily by myself. I have one guy I talk to a couple of times a week. We share ideas, and that's really it. So if you ever want to reach out to me, give me a shout, Huzefa@dailyforex.com. Check out FX Academy. I'm going to post some links actually in the the couple of questions I get asked all the time is what broker are you using and what are some of the resources. So the broker I used is AvaTrade. They're not the cheapest in terms of spread, but they're the most consistent. And I've realized that it's no point trying to chase the smallest or tightest or the spreads or the brokers with the highest leverage. You really want consistency of execution. You want good customer service. AvaTrade is super well regulated. I've never had issues withdrawing capital. FXTM, it's a good broker. I've used them in the past. Some of the concepts I've talked about, trend trading and so on, check out FX Academy. FX Academy there's a bunch of lessons. I've actually written some of the lessons there. There's lessons on trading trends, on support and resistance, and so on. And lastly, there's a poll. So if you just want to answer some questions, it'll give us an idea about what you think of today's webinar. Just go. It takes 2 minutes to fill out the poll. That'd be really useful to us. Have a fantastic. It's super early for me, so I'm gonna. I've got my cup of coffee right here, so I'm gonna finish that off. And I always make my coffee for the webinar. I never sip it at all during the webinar, so it gets cold. The first thing I'm gonna do is finish my cup of coffee here. Wherever you are I believe South Africa is on GMT, so have a fantastic lunch. Thank you for joining me from around the world, and see you in a couple of weeks. Take care. Bye now.